And welcome back. This video is the second part of our Chromatrope project. This is where we left off in the last one. So we were able to build the basic structure of our Chromatrope sort of simulation. We have two layers of slides and we are blending them together using the comp, and then we are cropping out the sort of extra stuff from that composition, so getting rid of this white background here. So this is already kind of okay, but the additional things that I would want to do is that firstly, since we have a bunch of these other slides available, it would be kind of a waste that I wouldn't use them. So I want to include all these other slides into my project, and I want to create some sort of way to switch between showing different slides essentially. And I'm going to build it in a way, since these are kind of let's go to the preview. So these are sort of created, the slides originally they were painted as sets of two. So there's like this one is one pair, another one, and so on. And then there's a few sort of these random ones, those special effect slides. We'll see what we can do with them later. But I would want to at least be able to switch or select which one of these pairs is visible in my Chromatrope. So well, obviously we will need to bring in all of these other images to our project, and let's do it also by just like we did it for the first pair, by dragging them in. And so I'll just select all of these images, so except for the first two, because those I already have here, and I'll just drag them in, and it kind of looks like that it somehow failed, that it only brought in one image. Actually that's it brought in all of them, but they are kind of all layered on top of each other. So if I start kind of if I deselect this and click on another operator, and then come back here and then start sort of dragging these around, you'll notice that, oh, they actually are here. They were just stacked on top of each other. So what I need to firstly do is I want to kind of organize these. So let me just first bring them out, and I'll try to kind of already set them in this pair. So I find, okay, this is one pair, I want to group them together. Here's yeah, sorry, there's no other pair yet. So then yeah, just like sort of unravel these from the stack, and just like try to group them into the pairs. So here's another one, so let's keep those two together, move them maybe here. Then we have this one is another pair, so I'll keep these kind of close to each other. Here's another pair, I'll select them and put them close to each other. And here's another one, let's move that here, and then here's these two are a pair, so I'll move them here. And then we have 4 images or 4 slides. These ones, they don't really have a exact pair, so we'll check later like what kind of effects we can create by introducing these into the mix. But for now I'm gonna sort of set them aside somewhere here, and I'll just work with these pairs that I have. So let's think about what we want to do here before we go into this too much. I would like to structure my project here in a way that I don't really need to change anything to this part. I can do the masking just once at the very last stage of my project, so that whatever comes in, I'll just crop the circle as a sort of very last step of my operation here, or the program. Transform also, I don't need to repeat it for every single layer. I can just have one transform, and I would like to just add here something, sort of where the image comes in. I want to add some sort of a way to switch or select what image goes into the transform. And I want to do the same thing here for the other layer. And I would like to do this in these pairs, so that when I switch this, sort of the top layer here, let's say that I want to use these two. I want to switch on the top layer, this one visible here, and then on the bottom layer I want to switch this one being visible there. So let's firstly just like visually structure our images and sources and like sort of the flow of what I'm doing here in a way that allows us to easily then connect them together. And I'm gonna just say that there's a thing that we can add here that allows us to do this sort of switching between different sources. It is actually called a switch, so that's what we'll add later. But let's think about this a little bit. So I have these two images, and I want to kind of like connect one of them to this top layer. So this top layer, you notice that it's spinning counterclockwise, and the bottom layer, this is spinning clockwise. And just wondering, like, is there something in these images that will look better? Like, does either one of these images look better if it's spinning clockwise or counterclockwise? And if we kind of look at this by accident, or actually on purpose, I did it this way. So if yours are reversed, you might want to change them. It doesn't really matter, but it just creates a different visual effect when you combine them together. If you look at it, this kind of like spinning counterclockwise, the sort of the swirly, the spiral of these layers, they are kind of following the sort of direction of rotation here. So maybe I want to stick to that. So if I'm choosing which one of these images or the slides should go to the top layer that's spinning counterclockwise, maybe I want to choose this one, because here the sort of spiral is also kind of like looks like it's sort of being rotated into the counterclockwise. So that's what I'll do. I'll kind of like try to keep that as my rule of selecting which one of the pair images goes to the bottom or the top layer. And the bottom layer is just the difference between them is that the direction of the rotation. So here you can see that it's kind of swirl is sort of bent this way. So at least to me that makes sense. I don't think it really matters in the final result so much, but I'm gonna follow this. So let's give a little bit of space here. So I'll move this a little bit higher so we have space for all of the images here. And maybe also try to somewhat like, if I'm kind of like try to with the color coordinate, so that if I'm going with the green, yellow, red ones, then I'm sticking with the same color here. So out of these two images or these two slides, I need to choose which one is kind of like going in the direction as this one. I think this the top, deselect. I think this one is more fitting to spinning counterclockwise, and this one is more fitting to be here. So then let's go to, maybe we'll go to this color, and again my choice of which one goes on top or which one goes on the bottom. I will think this one will look better here, and this one will look better here. Let's maybe then do this pair. Again, I'm gonna choose maybe this one over here and this one over here, and two more to go. So let's go maybe this one first. Again, looking at it, I think this one should be spinning counterclockwise, and I think this one should be spinning clockwise. And the final pair, I think from these ones, if I choose it the same way, I think this one should be here and this one should be here. Okay, so now I have on the top I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and on the bottom I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the pairs are sort of like the order how they're stacked here. This actually matters when we do the next steps. So make sure that you do it sort of organizing it this way, so that the corresponding pairs are in the same order. And then yeah, like we'll deal with these later. We'll see what we can do with them. But for now, I just want to focus on these. Let's move things a little bit still, kind of give a bit of more space here. I think that's fine. Maybe give a little bit of space in between. So let's do first the top layer. As I said, there is a switch that we can add between the source and then the transform. So if I right click on the cable and I do insert operator and I search for a switch top, again we're dealing with pixels and textures, so top is what we need and the switch top is what I'm looking for. And it says that it is a multi-input operator which lets you switch which input is passed through using the input parameter. Sounds exactly like what I was looking for. So let's see how it works. I'm gonna just try it first with 2. So I'm gonna connect the second image, second slide into the switch. And here, if I have the switch selected and I look at the parameters, there's a thing called index. And the index is that thing that decides which of these inputs is going through the switch. So the first input is an index 0. It doesn't really say there that it's index 0, but it's just the switch 1. And here it's this is a oh sorry, maybe yeah here like yeah, the multi-input, it doesn't really tell you like what is index, what is what, but it's going in the order like how the wires are stacked here. So this is 0, this is 1, 2, 3, and so on. So if I change the index value here, if I type in number 1, you'll notice that it changes into the second input. And if I go back to 0, it goes back to the first input. There's also this blend between inputs. So if I do if I go from 0 to 1, it's not actually doing what I was thinking it does. So yeah, it's or well, actually yeah, if you don't, yeah, it will do the blending if I scroll it, if I don't just jump from 0 to 1, but I'd rather sort of move the slider. It kind of like does a crossfade between the different layers. For now, the way that we're going to be controlling it is we're going to be like doing just sort of hard transitions. You can change this later on to do blending, but the way that I'm going to build it, it's going to be based on just like jumping directly to the other one. Although it would be easy to change that or modify it later. So we might do it. But anyway, this is how it works. So changing the index will decide which input goes to the output. And if I connect all of these here, it will then allow me to switch between every single one of them. And I could do this manually like one by one. So going from the output of this one, adding to the switch, but I would like to show you a little trick. So if you select all of these unconnected images or slides that I have here, and just select all of them using the right holding and clicking and dragging the right mouse button. If I now that they're all selected, if I start dragging a connection from the first image here, and I'll just drag it to the switch and let go, it will connect every single one of them into the switch, and it will do it in the order that they are placed here on the editor. So that's why this matters, like the actual that they are sort of neatly one after another. So that did it for the switch. And then just to check that it works, before we do the second layer, just to check that it works, I'm gonna go in the switch and I'll just I'll zoom into the transform and I'll just go, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then that's the end of it, because we start counting from 0. We have 7 images. The first index is 0, the second one is 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it works. Let's do the same thing for the other layer. So we can add between the source and the transform, we can add by right clicking on the cable or the wire, and we say insert operator, and we add a switch. So you can start typing it and just press enter and it will add it. So one of them is here. We can use the selection box to select all of these disconnected slides, and we start dragging from the first one and we connect it to the switch, and it will automatically do it for all of these, all of the sources. So again, here I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And if I check the switch, if I try it out, I select the switch operator and I have zoom into the transform so I can see what I'm doing. I'll scroll this value 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Seems to work, but it only works. So now I have the switch 2 selected. You'll notice if I change that, I'm creating interesting patterns, which is also like great. It's nice that I can do it individually, so for the different layers. But to kind of get the full effect of what was the intended patterns created by these original slides, I would need to switch the switch 1 and the switch 2 at the same time. So when I scroll this, I would want to also see the other one changing. And here we would have multiple options again of how do we connect this index to the index of the switch 2. But the way I'm going to show you is something that will then help us once we add the keyboard interaction here. So I'll first show it how we just do it manually, like we make one slider and it will connect both, or it will control both. And then we'll do a keyboard interaction where we just press a key 1, it will show this one. If we press key 2, it will show this one, and so on. So let's try that. And in order to kind of like change any kind of this numerical values, we're going to start to need to use the chops, so the channel operators. So instead of adding a top, we're going to add a chop. And the chop that I want to add for now is a constant, just to firstly try this out. So searching con in the chops will give me the constant as an option. I'll click it and I'll add it here. And the constant chop is basically, it's quite simple. It's just like, it's a way to add a constant value that you are able to, or it's a value that you can change over time, and it will, you can feed it into other operators for controlling various things. You can add multiple channels here, so you can have multiple outputs from, multiple channels being generated by this one operator. But for now, just delete, if you added these extra ones, just delete them extra ones and keep one only there. And let's see how this works. So we can give it a name if you want. It can be called chan1 for now. Let's keep it at that. I can this slider here only goes from 0 to 1, but what I can do is I can type in different values. So I can type in 2, hit enter. I can type in 4. I could type in 56 and hit enter. All of those, it's just the slider is just built in to only work with a range of 0 to 1. So this should work as long as we're able to somehow send this value to both of these index inputs here. One thing to note about these values. So like maybe your first instinct would be somehow to, okay, I'm going to take the constant, I'm going to take the output of it, and I'm going to try to connect it to the switch. But what you'll notice that if you try to connect it, the input port kind of like blocks itself. It like when you get too close to it, when you try to connect something that doesn't belong there, it will actually shut down and doesn't allow you to connect it into it. And only a top can be connected into the switch. So there has to be some other way to send this value that I'm changing here into the index, and there is, and that's done. That's going to be done kind of similar way that we did the rotation. So like adding an expression essentially into the to the value, and this there's an easy way for us to do it instead of having to remember what to write here, because in the beginning you'll not remember exactly like how to format these Python expressions on how to refer to a certain channel or a certain operator. So that actually is, there's an easy way to do it by just clicking and dragging. But before we do it, I want to show you one thing. So this value that we're controlling here, so there's a, it's on the left side, this is the number 1 here, this is the actual value that we're generating. The right side is the channel name. Remember that there's a name that we can add here, I'll change here, that you can decide what it is. Channel 1 is fine for now, but the left side is the actual value. When we connect a chop's value into a top or whatever other parameter that you want to control, you should never do it directly from the source that is generating this value, which in my case is this constant, but rather you should always, and this will become kind of like more clear why we do this later on, but just to remember now, you should always add in for a chop that you're planning to use as some sort of value that's going to be controlling something, you should always add a null object. And just to quickly say again, I'm adding this by clicking the output port, so it starts dragging a wire. Then I click tab, and then I search for null, and that creates this null object. A null is kind of what it says. It doesn't really do anything. It just essentially just copies or passes through whatever value comes to the input without doing anything to it. But it is very, very, very useful for us concerning our flow of data. So that's what we have to kind of be a bit conscious about, that data comes from somewhere, it goes to somewhere, and then stuff happens in between. So a null acts as sort of a kind of like a terminator of your chain of events, or some sort of like a branching point, or something that says, okay, from here I can take this value somewhere, and then there's the source that I'm not really touching, and then I can add something in between to manipulate this data if I need to. So a null always add after a job. Just start doing it, and then you'll notice later how useful it is when you do it. Okay, just to show you, if I change this to 2 or 3, this value is getting copied or shown here in the null. Now, how to do the actual connection from here to here? It happens by doing this, that you have to click into this little icon that says viewer active, and you'll notice that it changes how the operator looks. I can toggle between these different views. We already saw this with the geo I showed in the previous video, or like the first video. The geo allows, if you're in the viewer active mode, you can kind of manipulate this 3D view. In the case of a null, what happens if you make it active is that, again, I cannot move this operator anymore. It's like stuck here in this one place. At least I cannot move it by dragging from the center like I can do here. But what is also happening is, like when I start dragging, you notice that there's this like arrow pointing to the right. It means that when I click and drag, it means that I'm trying to connect this to something. And the something where I'm trying to connect this value to should be here in the index. So there's two ways now how we can drag this value into this. If you have something else active other than the one that you want to control, if I start dragging from the null and I drag from where the value is shown, I drag from here and I go over the switch, TouchDesigner actually makes the switch active and it shows then the values here in the parameter window. And now I can go and drag my value to the index number box. And there's three options now to choose from. The current chop value is not really useful in this case. It will just basically would be copying whatever value is now to the value of the index, and then it's done. It will never, it's not like constantly updating it, just does it once. Chop reference is the one that we are going to be using pretty much all the time, and this will then add an expression to the value that refers to my null object, and I'll show you in a second what it looks like. An export chop would in practice do the same thing. It would work pretty much the same as the chop reference. It's just a different way of connecting things together in TouchDesigner, and it's kind of like I think it's a bit older way, and the chop reference is a bit newer way. It used to be that the export is faster. I think nowadays there's no real difference. The chop reference is it just looks a little bit different. So I'm gonna do it by clicking the chop reference. You'll notice that it turned into this different color, which shows that it's controlled by an expression. If I click the plus, I can see what the expression is. And this is what it looks like. This is how you refer to different objects and different channels in TouchDesigner. There's this special keyword called op, meaning operator. It's saying that, okay, find in the network, find an operator called null1. So it's right here. And from that null1, use a channel. You notice that these are in square brackets. So square brackets show you that it's talking about channels. So find a channel from null1 called chan1, and then connect that value to the index. So what happens now if I change the constant value? If I change it to 1, you notice that it changes here. If I change it to 2, again it updates the switch. If I change it to 0, again it will choose this index 0. So that's already great. So I'm controlling this switch, but of course it's not yet updated here in any way. So we can do the same thing for the switch 2. I can start dragging from the null1, and I can go down over to the switch 2, and then I'll drag it to the index of this switch 2, and I'll do the same thing. I'll do chop reference, and I'll click the plus to check what it looks like. It's the exact same line that was in the other one. So you could have just copied and pasted this text. That would have also worked. You can type it in if you know exactly what you're referring to. You can just type it yourself. You don't have to use the click and drag thing. But the dragging and dropping sort of way to do it is really easy and kind of a foolproof way of doing it. So now what I can do, I want to change something in the constant, but I would also like to, at the same time, I would want to see this output view. I can do it here. Since I have the constant selected, I could just change. I can have my view zoomed into this, and I can change the value here. I can do number 1. I can do number 2. And now you can see why did we pair the two sort of matching pairs together? It's because they are really designed to be working this way. So number 3 creates also a nice pattern. Number 4 also kind of like a matching pattern that creates these really nice waves. Number 5, it's a nice star shape in the middle, and then the last one was number 6. Also these are sort of different segments almost of the pattern. So all of these are now synced up. And so I was saying that, yeah, I can do this. I can kind of like be zoomed into the last stage stage of my output and then change the values if I have the constant selected. But also something I showed I think already in class, but I'll show it here just one more time. If I right click on the output, or the last stage of my network here, if I right click there and click view, I can open up a sort of a floating window that I can keep open here on the side, and then I can go in and change my constant value to like switching between 0 and 1, or typing in number 3, or whatever I might be doing, and I can see the output window. I can scale this. I can double click the title bar to make it sort of fill my screen. This is a handy way. I'll show you another way. So I can close this window, and by the way, you can do this for as many windows as you want. So I can open one for this one, I can open one for this one. So as long as your computer can handle all these separate windows, because it's a bit resource intensive when you do multiple of them. As long as your computer can handle, you can add as many as you want. There's also another way. So if I want to see this all the time, sort of like what am I actually outputting, here in the bottom there's this little blue circle. If you click on that, it says display. It will actually add that whatever is being rendered here, it's showing here in the background of your editor. So if you like to work this way, you can then keep it all the time in the background, and you can modify your settings and whatever you're doing, and all the time see the updates. And by the way, you can also do this for multiple things. So you can have this one also active, and then it just adds, it kind of divides the background of your editor for these different layers. But in this case, I think it's going to be a bit distracting or if I keep these on. So I'm going to turn them off so that you can actually see what I'm doing. Oh, and you can also do the same thing for, it does not have to be a top. You can also do it for the chops. You can add it to the background, so you can now constantly see the value of this constant chop. Maybe not so useful in this case, so I'm not gonna do that. Okay, so this is already quite a long video, but we haven't yet done the keyboard stuff. But we were able to sync up these two layers, so they're switching at the same time. Let's now add the keyboard. So there's in the operators, the chops there, if you search for key, there's a keyboard in chop. So I'm just going to add that. And the way this works is that if I zoom into it and I'll just press some keys. So if I press key number 1, you can see that the value changes from 0 to 1. So now I'm pressing key 1. If I press key 2, nothing happens. Key 3, nothing happens. This only reacts now if I press the number 1 on my keyboard. And why is that? It's because if you look at the keyboard in parameters, it's only set to listen to that specific key. If you want it to respond to other keys, you just need to add it to this list. And you can add to the list by clicking this little arrow here and like choosing number 2, choosing number 3, and so on. And now you'll notice that it added different channels. So if I press 1, it's updating this. If I press 2, it's updating this. If I press 3, it's updating this. But if I press 4, nothing happens. So we can add things to this list, and you can do it from this menu, or you can just do space 4 space 5 space 6 space 7. I think I had 7 layers, so that's what I want to do. So, and then I press enter. And now if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all 7 keys are working. But I would need to change this structure where I have multiple channels representing what key is pressed. I would want to somehow consolidate this different channels, 7 different channels. I would want it to be just one value, and I would want that value to represent which key I pressed. or this which channel in this order, which one I pressed, or which one became active. And there might be a better way to do that, but this is the way I know how to do this. And someone tell me if there's a much better way, but this is how I know how to do it. So there's a job called fan. I'm just adding it after the keyboard. So adding a fan. And what the description says for the fan, it converts one channel out to many channels, or converts many channels down to one. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm wanting to convert many channels to just one channel. So sounds like a thing that I would like to use. So by just adding it, if I now press, it's not really doing what I want. And the reason why it doesn't do what I want is because I need to set the fan's settings to be not fan out, but fan in. And now if you look at it, I press 1, it's just saying 0. If I press 2, it's saying 1. If I press 3, it's saying 2. If I press 4, it's saying 3. If I press 5, it's saying 4. So it's just showing me the index of which key or which channel is being active. So channel 1 means index 0, channel 2 means index 1, and so on. So exactly what the kind of structure that I was looking for the switch. If I press 1, I want to choose index 0, so the first image going to the switch. So this kind of seems to do the trick. So let's see if it works directly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the constant just up away from here, and I will just replace the output from the fan, and I'll just connect it to this wire that goes into the null. And this is also another reason why I didn't connect it directly to this constant, is because we can now change what is the input that is actually controlling this null. So I'm going to switch it over to this one. Oh, but something broke. If I look at the error, what it says, this seems a bit of a weird error. I'm not really understanding what this means, or like what did I do wrong. The thing that I did wrong is that now that I connected the fan into the null, I have, if you look at the differences that are with the constant, so like there's a number and then there's a channel name. The thing that changed was that I accidentally, or on purpose, or by just how this thing was built, I changed the channel's name from chan1 to k. And the issue is that my index for the switch is listening to operator called null1, and it's listening to channel called chan1. So if I'm sending in a k channel, it doesn't know what to do with it. Gladly, there's quite an easy fix that we can do. So I'll just add in between the fan and the null, I'm going to add a new operator, so insert operator, and I'm going to add a rename. And the rename allows me to rename a channel, as you would expect. So what I can say that whatever comes in, so there's just a star or asterisk, so it's saying whatever channel comes in, change its name to whatever is defined in the 2. So I'm just going to type in chan1 here, press enter, and now the channel name has been changed back to chan1 and everything works. I don't get this error anymore and everything should work fine. So let's see if it works. I'm going to right click on the mat and I'm going to do view so that I see it here as sort of a separate output window. And then I'll press key number 1. Well, that works because it's already was that layer. I press key number 2. If I hold it, it works. So it kind of, but if I release it, it will go back to the first one. If I press 3, again, it works if I hold it, but when I release it, it goes back to 0. So it kind of works. I can switch between these. I can all the way up to 7. So this is number 7. This is 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. But as I said, if I don't hold the key, so now I'm pressing 4, once I release it, it goes back to the default. That's not really what I want. I would like it to hold the value that I selected, and only update it to when I click a new key. So also this constant, I don't need it anymore. I'm gonna delete this whole thing. I'm just gonna get rid of it. So I just have the keyboard in, going to the fan, going to the rename, going to null. And now at this point you might already be a little bit like confused or frustrated or kind of not understanding why do we do things in this kind of way. Why don't we just have like an if statement saying that, okay, key comes in, if something happens then do that. That's just because of the nature of how things work in sort of with the operator. If you're working with directly with the operators and the chops and everything, it's a bit quirky compared to your like traditional programming languages where you're working with if statement and that's how you control the flow of the program. Here you have to switch your thinking a little bit or kind of learn a new way of thinking about how to control things in your code. Or if you want to, you are allowed to, like you can write just Python code and do your if statements and other sort of more maybe familiar structures for programming. There are also options for that. But let's try to learn the kind of quirks and weird ways of constructing things in TouchDesigner. So like this kind of structure, maybe you wouldn't have thought of doing it unless I kind of now taught you how to do it. But now you know it, that you can kind of use the fan to create this sort of combining things into one or spreading one thing into multiple things. So the thing that I want to do is I want to create a sort of this sample and hold structure that is kind of familiar from a lot of other programming environments. I want to create it in here, and I'm gonna go to the creating this new operator, and I'm gonna search for hold, and this seems to be what I need. So I can send in a value and I can tell when I want to sample it and when I want to hold whatever was previously there. So I think what I want to do is I want to add it after I've done this fan. So after I combined these multiple channels into this one value that I'm getting here, I want to send that to the input of the hold, so the first input. And the way that the hold works is that now if I press it, you see that it's not being updated at all. It just stays at 0. The reason is because I don't have anything connected to the trigger. And the way that this hold works is that if there's a 0 or nothing connected to the trigger, it's just blocking. It's not updating its value. So if I want to update the value that's in the hold, I need to send a sort of a true Boolean value or like 1 into it to the trigger, and then it will sample it. And how do I want to structure that? Again, this will be maybe a little bit like weird that this is how we have to do it, but bear with me. Once you learn these tricks, it will become like at least for me, this is a lot more enjoyable than writing code. I like to work this way a lot, like visual connections, everything is real time. For me it works, but if you are really kind of a person who likes to write code as text, then maybe this is not the right tool for you. But I think a lot of people who are thinking visually, this works really well. But the way that I want to do this then is I want to create kind of like an if structure that says that if any of these channels that are coming from the keyboard, if any of them are pressed, then I want to sample this value and send it forward. If I'm not pressing anything, then I don't want to sample this value. Just stay at what you were previously. So this would be kind of like a thing where we would do an if statement, or like sort of, yeah, like saying that if any of these inputs is true, then send a true onwards. And the way that we do that kind of structure in TouchDesigner, so I'm going to click to the output of the keyboard and I'm going to create a new operator here. Click tab, and I'm going to add a logic chop. And a logic chop is pretty much the closest thing to an if statement that you have with the normal channel operators. And the way that this is going to work is that I need to say for the logic job that basically it's the convert input is like off when 0 or less. So like if it's 0, it means it's off. If it's anything above 0, then it will turn on. But now it's doing it, you notice that it's basically doing it for each channel separately. I would want to combine these channels together. And there's a combine channels option for the logic that says you can choose different things. So I can either say AND, which means that I would have to have all of these channels on, and then it will send a true or on message forward. Or in my case, actually what I want to use is an or any of these other things, but what I want to use is the or, which means that if any of these channels from the keyboard is on, then send a logic on, so basically send it 1 onwards from here. So no matter which one I press, it will go from 0 to 1 as long as one of them is pressed. If nothing is pressed, then it's a 0. So this is exactly what I want to send to my logic, to my hold trigger input. And now when I press 1, it's sampling, well, although nothing seemed to change because it's still 0, it's the index 0 from the channels. Nothing seemed to change, but it actually did update. If I press 2, it sends number 1 to the hold, and it keeps it there because when I let go, it stops sampling the input from the fan. If I press 3, it will change to 2, and 4, it will change to 3, and so on. So I'm pressing keys from 1 to 7, and the output here, this value in the channel, changes from, if I press 1, it will be 0, and it will go up to 6, just like the channel index in my switch, which is exactly what I want to do. I want to be able to control with my keyboard the index number of the switch that I'm sending it to. So obviously this is not doing yet anything. I need to connect this instead of directly from the fan. I want to connect this to the rename. So replacing a connection is by dragging it from the output to a wire that's already connected, and then that will replace that connection. So the sample and hold is now going to hold in place whatever I pressed. So if I press 1, I'm getting this. If I press 2, I'm getting this, and I don't have to hold it. I just click it once and it switches between these different things. And so I have now 7 different options for my Chromatrope, and I can click and kind of like really quickly toggle between them. We could do some sort of blending between these values, but I don't really want to do it because that will create sort of unexpected behavior also. So I just want to do like hard switch between the different layers or different slides. Okay, so this took almost like 45 minutes or almost 50 minutes, and it doesn't look like we managed to do a lot, but I hope you learned kind of many things about how to, well, firstly using the null after the chop, like connecting the null to the parameters and not connecting the source directly. Always use a null. That's one lesson to learn from here. The other thing is like how to just drag the value to the wherever you want to connect it to do this chop reference for values. We learned about these output windows. We learned about some funny things about how to work with if statement like structures in TouchDesigner. We learned about keyboard input, how we can make like a selector of different sort of settings or layers or states or whatever. And this will be very useful, this block here, or this structure that we built. This will be very useful for a lot of different things that you might be doing, kind of like switching between different inputs, Like let's say that you build a VJ software that you press 1, it will show the camera, you press 2, it will show a video layer, you press 3, it will show something else. Or just like doing this similar thing that we did here, kind of switching between different inputs. So that's already nice. We can use this manually, kind of like as a sort of a VJing tool already. By clicking in sync with the music, we can choose what to show. But the next step in the last video of this series for the Chromatrope, I want to add, so that the spinning motion is not happening constantly, I want to add it so that it's, well, first of all, that we can control the speed. We can make it slower or faster. And then eventually what I'll do is I will make the spinning of these patterns, I will make that be connected to the audio input of our of music from a file or from a microphone, so that it will be somehow also sound reactive and it's not just constantly spinning on its own. So that's going to be the third and last part of our series of Chromatrope tutorials. So I'm going to end this video here, and then I'll see you on the last part where we continue from this point onwards. So see you there.